There have been a great number of criminals throughout the globe. However, there are those individuals who have truly taken the limelight away from the heinous atrocities that have been perpetrated against mankind. Keep watching this video because you won't believe what these 10 criminals were capable of that has garnered them the greatest notoriety throughout history. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper is widely considered to be the most notorious in history. He was a skilled and cunning assassin. What's even more unsettling is how he managed to stay hidden from Scotland Yard's top investigators while targeting vulnerable women, mainly in the poverty-stricken Whitechapel district of London back in 1888. Jack, the Ripper's victims, were and other women who worked in the slums. He chose them because he believed they would be simple to kill since they resided in areas with fewer police officers. Also, the strange manner in which he dismembered the bodies contributed to the horrific nature of the crimes. Earlier in the year, DNA evidence emerged suggesting we can identify Jack the Ripper's true identity. A shawl found by the body of Catherine Eddowes that contains forensic stains has been used to determine the killer as Aaron Kosminski, a 23-year-old barber from Poland. Richard Ramirez. When Ramirez was a kid, he looked up to his cousin Mike, who had served in Vietnam. On the other hand, Mike had an unhealthy fixation with violence against women, and he showed young Richard photographs of women he had in Vietnam. So this affected Ramirez, who got fascinated with violence, despite the fact that many other things influenced his shift toward the evil side. Before being apprehended in 1985, Ramirez was responsible for the deaths of 14 individuals and the torturing of dozens more. He never had any feelings of guilt, and when he was told he would be executed by being suffocated in a gas chamber, he said, "Hey, big deal. There is no way to avoid death. It is an inevitable part of life." Ahmad Sarji, an Indonesian known as the Sorcerer, was believed to be responsible for the deaths of 42 persons between the years 1986 and 1997. The most troubling element was why he his victims and how he used to do it. He said that his dead father had appeared to him in a dream and told him that drinking the saliva of 70 young ladies who had just passed away would transform him into a spiritual healer. Thus, during his operations, he said he was a shaman, and many ladies visited him to improve their chances of becoming wealthy and attractive. After receiving payment, he would take his victims to a sugarcane field and bury them to their waists in sugarcane, stating that this was an essential element of the ceremony. After that, he choked them to death and drank their saliva. Ahmad Sarji was arrested when the police began digging up the victims' bodies near his house. Suomu Miyazaki. Suomu Miyazaki is a Japanese serial born preterm, which caused his hands to be malformed due to the condition. Because of this, he was the target of bullying at school, so his grades started to suffer. Thus, his mental state deteriorated, so he kidnapped and young girls between 1988 and 1989. After he had strangled them, he would participate in necrophilia with their bodies. He would also consume a portion of the hand of one of his victims and drink the blood of another. Miyazaki was ultimately taken into custody, but even after he was captured, he maintained an air of composure and calmness. If you're enjoying content like this, give this video a thumbs up and tell us in the comments from which country you're watching this video so we know where our content reaches. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was a criminal from the United States. He was responsible for the deaths of at least 33 young men and teenagers in Cook County, Illinois, between 1972 and 1978. Gacy planned to entice his victims with the prospect of employment in the construction industry before subjecting them to abuse, and ultimately causing their deaths by either asphyxiation or strangling. When speaking to his victims, he often introduced himself as Pogo the Clown. On the 10th of May, 1968, Gacy was taken into custody and charged with assault. However, the authorities discovered that he had buried 27 corpses under his home. Thus, on May 10, 1994, a jury found him guilty, and he was put to death by injection with a fatal drug. Ed Gein. Edward Theodore Gein was a corpse snatcher, often called the Butcher of Plainfield. He admitted that he was responsible for the deaths of Mary Hogan in 1954 and Bernice Worden in 1957. Additionally, it was discovered that he had dug up dead bodies from nearby cemeteries to use the bones and skin to fashion items. After it was determined that he had a mental illness, he was sent to a mental institution, and it was there that on July 26, 1984, he passed away from cancer. The Zodiac. In the late 1960s, Northern California was a hotbed for activity with the Zodiac. It is known that he was responsible for the deaths of at least 5 individuals, but this number was probably higher. According to the detectives, the offender might have had as many as 37 victims. On the other hand, David Faraday and his fiancée Betty Lou Jensen were in the first carried out by the Zodiac on December 20th, 1968. Their bodies were found alongside the vehicle in which they were traveling. There was no apparent reason for the and the authorities could not locate the suspect. Also, eyewitnesses provided the authorities with the information necessary to create a drawing of the Zodiac, but the perpetrator was never found. Until today, the true identity of the Zodiac has never been confirmed by law enforcement, though several suspects have been identified over the years. Ted Bundy. Theodore Robert Bundy was an American and burglar who attacked and killed around 30 young women. The rampage that Ted Bundy committed began in 1974. He pretended to be hurt to get his victims to follow him to his vehicle. He also took advantage of women's faith in him by manipulating them with his charisma. He would first lead them to a remote location, where he would proceed to subdue and then murder them. Despite the putrid odor, he would sometimes return to the dead body after an absence of many hours to engage in sexual activity with the decaying body. During his trial, he attracted much attention due to his charm and knowledge. Also, he struggled for years to escape being sentenced to death. However, he could not evade prosecution indefinitely, and on January 24, 1989, he was put to death for his crimes. Herold Frederick Shipman. Herold Frederick Shipman, a British physician, was a figure who lived up to the reputation of being Dr. Death. He was determined responsible for the deaths of over 218 of his patients, but the actual number may be as high as 250. He administered fatal amounts of medications through injection to his victims as a method of. After Shipman faked his patients' wills so that he might inherit their wealth, he had his patients overdose on morphine, which resulted in their deaths. The local undertaker expressed alarm over the high mortality rate among Shipman's patients. Nevertheless, the authorities could not locate any evidence against Shipman. However, following the passing of Kathleen Grundy, a rich widow of 81 years, a post-mortem medical study determined that she had passed away due to an overdose of morphine. Thus, he was taken into custody and found guilty of the charges. Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was a who operated in the United States between 1978 and 1991. It is documented that he assaulted and dismembered a total of 17 males and male children. In addition, it is well known that he engaged in necrophilia, cannibalism, and the long-term storage of body parts. As his fascination with human viscera grew, he started collecting various body pieces as souvenirs from the people he killed. Dahmer also attempted to reanimate his victims as zombies. In the beginning, he experimented with using sleeping drugs. Then, while they were still alive, he bored holes in their heads and poured boiling water and acid into the holes. On July 22, 1991, he was taken into custody. He eventually became a victim of a committed by a fellow prisoner. So which of these criminals surprised and disgusted you the most? Did we miss anyone on our list? Join the conversation and let us know in the comments below. And that wraps things up. We appreciate you watching this video. Please hit the subscribe button so we can continue creating content like this. And we'll see you in the next one.